So this notion of a handbill is, I know this person, Bradley, who's an excellent project manager, and I want to reach out to my network to introduce him in case my network has opportunity. They haven't asked for your resume. And frankly, that's too much information, because someone who's busy, who's doing a favor for a second and third degree introduction, doesn't have the time to read through it, and they're not telling your story the way you can tell your story. So think about it like an executive summary. Think about it like a one-pager that you can put, what are you looking for? What are the top skills you can contribute? What are the highlights you've had in your career in terms of impact, and potentially even who you're targeting in terms of industry or companies? And that you can let be socialized. So it's a little different but complementary to your resume and your LinkedIn profile that will help other people tell your story, because it's quick bites, it's bullet points, and you can add a picture if you'd like, but it really becomes your profile summary in a one page that other people can share. And then when you're interested in the details, then you can provide the resume. But if someone hasn't asked for it, you need a summary. If someone has asked for your resume, have that. But how do you help other people tell the story you want them to tell versus the one they have for themselves, I think is really important.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Job Seeker's Journey podcast. In the last episode, I spoke to Elissa Mahendra about what is it like to be an HR executive. Similarly, when I talked to Mark a couple episodes ago, and I got to ask a CEO some questions that I've always wanted to ask, in the last episode, I got a chance to do the exact same thing, but with an HR executive. Because as we all know, HR gets a bad rap, and it's not their fault. People don't understand what all they do. All they see is them letting people go, getting on to people, maybe onboarding people, but they don't see all of the other things. And it was very important to humanize the HR department of a company. But this is part 2 of our conversation, and I am just as excited about this part as I was about the last one. Because in this episode, we talk about what does it look like to find your value? Because that's a really hard thing to do when you've just been let go. Because you've just had a company say your services are no longer needed, but you still have value. What is it like to find that value? And in addition, we're going to talk about why is it important to craft a professional narrative when you get into those interviews, and how would you do that in order to shape the narrative of your past experiences so that it is positive and shows the company your value moving forward. So that's what this episode's about. So without further ado, here is the second part of my conversation with Elissa Mahendra. So we're going to make an assumption that a person who is recently in a job search has already gone through the stage of processing what has happened. They've taken some time, maybe it be a day, a week, a couple weeks, whatever it ends up being for them, and processed what happened and been able to deal with any emotion that may have came that way. And now they are sitting at the stage of determining what is next in my career. Where do I want to go? What do I want to do? So I love the fact that you hit on this on your collective, which we'll talk about here in a second. But I did want to talk to you a little bit about this, because one of the things that you mentioned to me when we were speaking earlier was about finding that value, figuring out your value. Where do you contribute the most? So I wanted to try to let you elaborate some more on finding that value and while you're determining what's next for you.
And that's really tough. right? Again, acknowledging that that's really tough because power comes from clarity, but you can't be clear on something when you're clouded by emotion, or if you've been let go, all the mental gymnastics that you go through because you're grieving the loss of what was. And oftentimes people are so wrapped up in their professional identity and their job title. Think about a networking event or anything, a family barbecue, or you're meeting someone else. What's the first thing that people ask? What do you do? And most people respond to that question with, I'm an HR, I'm a project manager, right? It's my profession or my title. And we are so much more than that, right? In the context of a networking event, I understand that, but we do it in our personal lives. And I reflect on a conversation I had with someone who's part of my personal board of directors. He also went through a job change and found himself really thinking about what he wanted next, what's next for him. And he decided to move to Mexico, right? And do his work there, right? It was a personal decision, create some flexibility in his life. And he said to me, which I thought was really interesting, the translation of that for folks that are in Mexico and have that same conversation is not what do you do? It translates to what do you dedicate yourself to? What do you give your time to? And that opens up a whole lot more than a job title. And so I would say day one, pause and reflect. When someone's in survival mode, and I have been in survival mode more times in my life than I have fingers to count them on, is I need to go back to what I was doing. I need to find a job. I need to be secure. You go into that fight or flight mode and you have to survive in that moment. But you're going back to something that may not be the right thing for you. So I would say when you're going through that, Bradley, it's important to pause and reflect. And that's what I've coached others on. I've tried to reiterate to myself when I'm in a period of reinvention and deciding what's next for me is, what do I want out of this next chapter? What is bringing me the most joy in that moment? And that is where I think the power comes from, is clarity in yourself and what you want. And then you can go out and do the action. So many times what I've seen is people rushing into action. I've got to get my resume in order. I've got to reach out to 15 people a day. I've got to apply for 20 jobs a day. I would offer you and listeners that just as important is to take care of yourself. Because it's like the oxygen mask. That's an overused analogy, but you have to take care of yourself. And it's hard to do because I'm constantly reminding myself to do it. And I know it works, which is pause, reflect, really think about what your strengths are and what sets you apart from others that may be embarking on the same path. And that will give you the power to kind of go forward in your job search.
Yeah. And I think it's easier to do for other people than it is to do for yourself. It's easy to look at someone. Yeah. And it's easy. Like I remember my wife was going through a similar thing and she was always been in oil and gas. What the job she was doing was pretty specific to oil and gas on the surface. And I remember as she was starting to wrap her mind around the fact that most likely her job was coming to an end, she was pretty worried at one point because she didn't know what she would be able to do outside of that. But for me, because I'm on the outside, I was able to look at her and say, at the end of the day, you are a data analyst. That's what you do. You take data, even though it's oil and gas specific right now, you take that data, you summarize that data, you analyze that data, and you make that data available for the geologists and other people that are going to take that data and make their decisions. So at the end of the day, you're a data analyst. And I remember that it was kind of a big, for her, it felt like to me that was a big kind of sigh of relief. Like, oh, okay, I do have this value that is outside of what I did that could be marketable to another company that's outside of that industry. So yeah, but as I sat and looked at myself, it was harder for me to look at things outside of just the tasks that a project manager does or the tasks that I did as a marketer, because I got jobs done. I knew I was kind to my teammates. I knew that we got projects done and they were successful, but outside of that, it was hard for me to like really nail down a value to that. So it's a hard exercise, and I love that you acknowledge that. One of my favorite parts of the conversation that we had when we were meeting each other was revolving around when you get an interview and you start to have to talk about your past experiences.
That's right.
I've had this personally where I've had some short stints, some on my control, most not. And I've had to answer to this. And I loved our conversation about that. So I want to revisit that a little bit. But as you've been on the other side and you've also been on the side that's been in the interviewee, what do you think is the best way to control that narrative of your past experiences so that it is a positive experience when you're in an interview?
Yeah, again, probably a topic we could spend a whole couple episodes on, but I think, if the first thing you do is pause and reflect on kind of what you want, the second thing you need to do is really own your story. And so this goes back to what we were talking about before with like that creating clarity for yourself. And from clarity comes your power, is owning your story. And just what you said, you have to own your story in order to sell yourself for whatever that next role is and what you can bring. Yeah. So I think after you pause and reflect on just what's going on and really what you want, you have to also sit with yourself and understand what's your value. And that's really hard to do. Trust me, I know from experience. If you've been through an experience where you're clouded by the situation, or if you've been let go as these 9,000 people you mentioned kind of yesterday, to say, what is my value? Because you're questioning, because you're associating the business decision that had to be made as a personal decision for you as an individual. And it's very hard not to take it personal when a business decision like that has to be made. But in that moment, you are not thinking about all the value you bring to a situation or to an organization. You start to question, was I as good as I thought I was? I've been applying for however many weeks or months. Other people aren't seeing the value. And that starts to creep in, that self-doubt. And you can't be effective in an interview. You can't show the best of yourself when you don't believe what you're trying to sell, right? If you don't really believe with everything and you have any doubt in your mind, it's hard to then turn that on in an interview. And some of that is situational. So I would say give yourself grace. And really, to your point, you could do marketing, you could do project management, and I bet that you'd be good at both. But it's that clarity that tells someone you're confident to come in versus meeting with someone and saying, well, I could do this and I could do this and I could do this and I could do this. But what do you want to do? What will you bring your whole self to? Because a previous leader of mine called me a Swiss Army knife because I've been in lots of places in HR. She could put me anywhere in the business and I could figure it out. I could take on things that were outside of my domain expertise. And it sounds like that's similar for you. And so for people like that, who are kind of chameleons, they're Swiss Army knives, they can do lots of things and be good at it. It's hard to say then, this is where I bring the highest value for you in that specific position or context or period of growth for the company. And that's where I think we need to spend more time. And I don't think people spend enough time, because you can't go into the interview unless you own your story. And that is one of the most important things you can do, because then that story presents itself on that handbill or executive summary, on your resume, on your LinkedIn profile. So I think it ties in.
Yeah. And I remember one of the things that we were specifically getting at is I had mentioned to you that I've had a couple experiences where I decided to get out in front of a question that I've gotten a few times, which was about the fact that I had short stints. And undoubtedly, if you get asked that question, even though you're not defensive,
Sure.
it feels like, in a way, you're put on the defensive.
Absolutely.
And when I've gotten out in front of it and found a way to acknowledge that it's there and give the story before they asked, in the 2 times in this season that I have done that, both times I've just gotten a simple, oh, okay, cool. I didn't get any kind of skeptical response whenever I got out in front of it. And so, but I remember you saying to me that it definitely matters how you present that. And I think the obvious one is not to, the obvious one is to not speak negative of past employers, or even if it ended badly, if you had a horrible experience, there had to be something positive you got out of that. And even if that positive thing was, I found out that this culture doesn't match my values or whatever that is, there's still a way to present that in a positive manner. So I loved your kind of response to me, and I wanted to give you a chance to kind of elaborate a little bit more on that, because I think that that is a really important thing. Sometimes things like layoffs are easy to explain, especially if you're in different markets where there's downturns and everyone knows, like, oh, okay, you were a part of a downturn. Or COVID is another example, because a lot of people laid off in COVID. Those are easy to explain, but some others are more difficult, especially if it's not a mass layoff, but it was a layoff or something like that. So what would you advise someone to do when they get caught into a situation where they know this question's probably coming and it could put me on a defensive if I don't get out in front of it? How would you advise somebody to do that exact thing?
Yeah, there's a couple things there. One is that it's part of owning your story. You have to own what happened, but remove yourself from the personalization of it. So yes, it happened to you. And what you want to do is distance yourself from the factual matter that a company had to make a difficult decision because of some external force. There's something going on with the market. Their profits aren't what they need them to be, and they need to make a difficult decision. And it's depersonalizing it, because no one wants to hire someone who is still carrying around animosity, bitter, or resentful, because what that translates to for an HR person or a hiring manager, whether they know it or not, is this person is a risk. So when you present as resentful or negative, I say, this person may be a risk. Now, whether there's truth to that or not, they're carrying that with them and they're willing to share it with someone they just met. So how are they going to carry that negativity if something goes wrong or there's a change or transformation in the new organization? Right? So that's one element. The second element I would say to be aware of is when you're going through this process and you're looking for something, it's easy to feel like, well, someone else is judging me because I was on the list versus my role or versus my function, right? Why was I let go? I wasn't indispensable to the organization, especially long tenured folks. So again, I don't want to gloss over this internal dialogue that many of us have around why me, why now, how could it be, right? That's all part of the grieving process, and that's kind of that first step. But don't bring that with you in the next. So a good way, one way, again, seek other opportunities for feedback. But one way is to say, this thing happened. Focus on the facts. This was the impact it had, and this is what I'm looking for next. And remove yourself from it. So I was with the organization for X amount of time. They were faced with difficult decisions about headcount due to X and Y factors. They looked holistically across the company and every department. This many people or this percentage was removed from the organization. I remain grateful for the impact that I had and go into really the value that you brought during your tenure. It removes it from, they eliminated me. They eliminated my position. They eliminated my role, me as a person, right? So it removes that emotion from it and focuses on the facts.
Yeah, I love that. So I had a question that came to my head when I was thinking about this episode with you. And I did want to ask it to you because I've seen this a few times recently, and it makes me wonder what could be going on, and I'm curious what you think. So the thing that I've seen lately is, especially with people that are making posts, that they have been out of work for extended periods of time, you know, especially once it gets over a year. You know, I've seen a person with 27 months. I've seen people that are everywhere in between that. And I've seen a lot of people post, I've applied to X number, and typically it's really high positions. I saw one person that said, I've applied to like something like 1,200 positions and I've gotten less than 5 interviews. And there's a huge part of me that has huge empathy for their experience. And then there's this other part of me that begins to wonder, what are they potentially doing wrong? Because if you are applying to that many places, law of numbers would say you should be getting more interviews than that. Just by pure chance, you should be getting more interviews than that. So my question to you is, do you think, or do you know of something that may be in common or maybe happening that someone who is experiencing these high numbers of applications and aren't getting any responses may be doing wrong, that maybe they can correct to try to improve that instead of just beating their head against the wall? So is there anything that you can see that may be happening that maybe someone can fix in order to not experience what they're experiencing?
Yeah, I'm trying to think of a good analogy for what you're asking. But really it's not that they're doing something wrong, right? Oftentimes people who are, and I don't know this person, I don't know the dimensions of the experience
Right,
or the
right.
context of the situation or their background or their experience. So are they a fit for the roles they're applying for? Are they, I don't know all the facts. But what I can say is oftentimes when someone is applying scattershot to so many things, you lost focus, so you aren't targeted. If it's 1,200 roles, I doubt that it's 1,200 of the same type of role. So that earlier point of I could do lots of things, and I'm not clear on my message to that recruiter to say I'm an expert in this. And part of it
Mm-hmm.
is because it takes a lot of work to be focused. So another element is, are they tailoring their resume to that job? Likely not. They're taking one resume and they're blasting it out to lots of different roles. And it's an act of desperation. And that doesn't mean they're wrong. It's that they are in despair. Desperation means they are in despair. They're in despair because their confidence has continuously taken a hit month after month, job application after job application. And let's be honest, those job applications, if it's not easy apply, are not easy to apply. Right? So the hours and hours it spends creates a feeling of despair in someone. And so the natural reaction to feeling of despair is desperation. It's pleading publicly, openly on LinkedIn. It's the green tab for I'm open to work, right? And whether or not people want to recognize that, that is an act of desperation when you're saying these things. That's not wrong because you're exactly where you are and you're acting to survive. Because in some cases, you're at your last mortgage payment. You're
Mm-hmm.
wondering whether or not you have to sell your car to be able to pay for your bills for your children for the next couple months. I spoke with one single mom that's her experience. And so I have nothing but empathy for folks who are that far into the job search. You're not doing anything wrong, but you're not optimizing your search. So if I want to build muscle, probably running 10 miles a day is not going to do it for me. I don't know why I'm
Mm-hmm.
not building muscle because you're not doing the thing that leads to the outcome that you're looking for. And so oftentimes we don't set goals for ourselves when we're in the job search the way we know how to as a professional. We're not treating ourselves or our job search like a project that has discrete deliverables, discrete milestones, discrete timeframes, and we get lost in it. So we're doom scrolling on our phone for new jobs every couple hours. We're, applying online. I hope this resonates because I've had lots of conversations that you're not focused. And so you get lost in the activity of the job search and not focused on the outcome of the job search. So that's what I
Mm-hmm.
suspect is happening in that situation. Because what people need during this time is clarity, they need confidence, and they need community. Because none of us can find
Mm-hmm.
the job alone. And that's, I think,
Mm-hmm.
the important part is that we need to focus on all those things. We need to create our clarity for ourselves about what we really want and create clarity for people to know what we want. We need to have the
Mm-hmm.
confidence in ourselves and our abilities and the strengths that we bring and what no one else can bring. What is Bradley's story? What is Elissa's story? How are we like no one else that is applying to this job? And then community to share best practices, to think about what's next. And to give you that perspective and that insight to say, hold on, before you apply to 100 more jobs, let's take a step back. What do you really want? What do you bring to the table? So that they can approach it with
Right.
confidence. And then there's some specific tactics you can take. So again, you talked previously about the hidden job market or LinkedIn as the only source, right? So there's other things you can do The other very small thing that I know gets a lot of attention now is applicant tracking system optimization. So it could just be their resume is not optimized for a machine to pick up on keywords for that specific job. So if I'm applying to 5 different types of roles with the same resume, I'm not getting the green light in the applicant tracking system, and it's kicking it out. And I'm getting ghosted, or I'm getting that automated message that says, thank you, we've gone with another candidate. We'll keep your resume on file. Right. So it's tough.
Mm-hmm.
It's tough.
It is tough. And unfortunately, it kind of, when you get to a certain point, it's kind of the definition of insanity. You just keep doing the same thing, and it's out of desperation. And again, I have a lot of empathy for them too. It's out of desperation, but you're doing the exact same thing, expecting a different result. And at some point, you have to recognize what I'm doing right now isn't working. And I need to change my strategy, and I need to be humble enough to be able to recognize, hey, this isn't working, and I need to try something else. And I think that the most encouraging thing that I've heard, and I know it is difficult for some people, is how many people on this podcast has talked about getting back to human connection to find that next opportunity.
That's right.
And developing quality professional contacts, developing and having quality conversations that are value driven. And in a lot of ways, it seems counterintuitive, because trying not to talk only about yourself, because the moment you just meet a new person and you say, I'm looking for work, do you know of anything?
Yes.
You've now put all the burden on them. Mm-hmm. And they may or may not have time to search around and do the work for you. But if you have the ability to meet with someone and either ask them the right questions, to actively listen to them and be able to put your value into their problems and all of those things, or do the homework before you ever meet with them to understand where they might have a hole and understand how you can fill that hole, the conversation is different. And I know I just recently applied that, and it is completely different, because, and not expecting them to do anything for you. You're just having this conversation. You may give your value, and even if nothing comes of it, you still make it about them. It changes. It seems counterintuitive, but it does work. And it is a different approach. And unfortunately, it feels like with where we are in the market, with where we are with LinkedIn, with where we are with job boards in general, with how many jobs out there may have just been left because it's been filled, but they forgot to take it off, or the company's not really looking to hire anybody right now, but they're testing the market, which I know is happening. It requires something different than just hitting apply, because I have gotten 2 jobs from LinkedIn solely, but that was 10 years ago, and that was 5 years ago. And it was a specific company. It was small enough that the HR department was actually running the LinkedIn and did get the resumes directly, and it wasn't going through a system and all of those things. So the stars almost had to align for that. But that's why I wanted to ask you that question, because it hurts my heart when I see that they're spending all this time spinning wheels. So thank you for asking or answering that. And I want to make sure that we get to your collective, because I love that you're starting this. We have a similar heart in this. And so I wanted to give you a chance to talk about the Power to Rise Collective, why you wanted to start it, what the mission is of it, because I think anyone who listens to this should join this collective. If you're listening to this, you're looking for information, And this is another way for you to get information to help you on your journey. So I wanted to give you a chance to talk about that.
Yeah, thank you. And I think that really we've covered a lot of topics that will be important to continue and really dive into, which is, when you're talking about the career seeker's journey, right? Why you started this is to pay it forward and share information and create community for people who are going through similar things or people who have gone before you that can minimize some of that pain or some of that despair over time in your job search journey. So I was really wrestling with, gosh, I'm having so many conversations with people that are either displaced through a reduction in force or a layoff or, a downturn in the market, people who have said, there has to be something more than what I'm doing. And they've opted out, but they don't really know what's next. And so just having conversations, people know that I'm in HR. So people in family and friends often call me and say, do you know anyone? Can you look at my resume? And I just was struck that so much is focused on the action is I have to survive, resume, LinkedIn. Those are the things I need to do. But what I know to be true, being an HR executive and having, 20 years of experience, is that you don't rise by hustling harder. And that's what I had to learn. And I'm still learning every day because I'm a hustler and I GSD, right? I get stuff done. But working harder doesn't mean you're going to rise. Working harder isn't going to get you the next thing. It helps. It's a great foundation, but you're not focused in what you need to be focused on. And so I thought about it and I thought, well, maybe I'll just put what I've been telling people into a one pager. And then I thought, well, that kind of falls flat because there's lots of one pagers. There's lots of top 10 lists. There's lots of resume tips. But really what I kept coming around, and I think the universe was echoing to me because I'd have personal conversations, I'd have work-related conversations, and I kept coming to there's a huge missing piece up front that's this inner work. It's this inner work about, one, my mental health up front around if I went through this traumatic experience, I'm grieving that thing that was. And I may not be clear on or be able to get clear on what's ahead. Because I've seen people have defamatory posts online. I've seen people that are stuck in that resentment, that negativity. And so I kept coming to the same place. People need clarity, they need confidence, and they need community. And so I, did some wordsmithing, I did some brainstorming, and I came up with Power to Rise because I've always considered myself to be a powerful person. I, have a Greek background, so I love that kind of warrior spirit. I recently took up Taekwondo as an adult with my kids, so that just is where I am in my season. Is kind of that warrior spirit of like you have to reclaim your power. Because oftentimes in this situation, or even if you're in a situation where you have a bad boss, bad culture, it affects you. You lose sleep. I mean, I've certainly in my career had ups and downs and had an eye twitch for a month because of the stress I was under, right? People have physical manifestations of stress and what I'll call misalignment. And being able to recognize quickly when you're in misalignment with what you want. And so this power piece is not about ignoring that. It's about understanding who you are and the power you bring and being able to bring that to what's next for you. And then the rise piece is all about the action you take. And most of the things that I've seen, out on social media or on LinkedIn or even in outplacement services that are often given to people in transition is all about the action without the inner work of reflection. And so again, knowing what I know, having developed talent for many, many years and having managed programs that develop talent and leaders for organizations, I wanted to bring those pieces together and create a community, because that's the most important. Tools can help, but it's the community that brings it to bear. So I wanted to start this collective, because it's not one way, it's kind of crowdsourced, because we all have information to share, stories to share, resources to share. And sometimes it's nice to know you're just not alone in the search, and the power that can bring. So I'm really excited about bringing that to people I know, people I don't know. And the idea is that we will bring kind of tools, resources, transformation to people who are part of the collective. And it doesn't need to be just people who have been displaced. If you're sitting in a role thinking there has to be more than this, it's for you. If you're thinking about, gosh, I just am not aligning with my boss, the culture, the company, it's different than when I started, this is for you. If you're just curious about how to position yourself differently in your current role, or position yourself for the next promotion, what's next doesn't have to be a complete 180. And you were talking earlier about the people who are saying, I actually don't want to go back to what I was doing. I want to reinvent myself into something completely different. I want to open a cupcake shop or a restaurant or something completely outside of what I thought. Let's explore that too, because there are people who have gone before you and have found this next chapter being much more powerful, much more satisfying, much more aligned with what their passion, their purpose, their interests are, and create that balance that we're all looking for, this elusive balance that we're all looking for.
Right. Yeah, I absolutely love it. I can't wait to see what all comes out of it. And I love that you have repeatedly, when we've been talked about taking ownership, because that's something that has been a mantra for me for quite a long time, but especially in this season of taking ownership of yourself, your career, what's happened. Because as you do that and you recognize where, I've heard it said like this: when you get let go from a company, you have two options. You can be a victim of that, and you can point the finger and you can say, they did this to me and they did this and then they did this. And then you sit in despair and you try to figure out what's wrong with me and blah, 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 blah. Or you can look at it objectively and you can say, here's where I may have contributed to this, good or bad. That doesn't mean that you're beating yourself up. What that means is that you're learning and you're saying, hey, I could have done this a little differently. And I could have or you look at the situation as a whole and you say, man, when I look at this in totality, this was a tough situation for me to walk into for whatever reason that is. And I tried my best and I did this, maybe I did this wrong, but this is what the totality of the situation is. And now you are, your head's up higher. You understand where you are. You understand what maybe you need to improve in. And when you can talk about it, it's less, there is no victimhood. There is no, oh, this was a terrible environment and they just screwed me. And I was just in this, whatever, caught up in this bad situation. No, you can say, hey, I learned this. This was great. I love this about my job. I love the people, whatever it may be. And then this happened. And I love that you've been talking about ownership this whole time, because I just think it's so important as you are analyzing where you want to go next of analyzing yourself in a positive way. So,
and what you do by owning it is you take back that power. If you stay in the resentment, if you stay in, they did this to me, you're giving up your power and your agency. And that doesn't serve you and it doesn't serve other people. So as you think about kind of that journey for you, you have to start with, I may have done nothing wrong to contribute to being on a list because someone 5 layers up in the organization had to look at job codes with no people's names attached and make a decision, right? That is the reality of sometimes the way that it happens, especially as you're talking about 9,000 people, right? They don't know the person. And in some cases, the manager doesn't even have the ability to weigh in. So leaders are making decisions for frontline managers, like your father's example, that they don't have a say. And so what the job seeker needs to focus on is, this is the situation. These are the facts about the situation. And this is what is within my control to do now. So that old adage of, when life gives you lemons, make lemonade. Okay, I have a lemon. What am I going to do with it? I can go get another lemon. I can make lemonade. I can squeeze the heck out of that thing. I can take all the seeds and I can replant them and I can start a lemon orchard, right? There's more than one thing you can do with the lemon, but only you know what's right for you. And so I think, again, owning it, taking your agency back, taking your power back, and then using the community that you have around you to continue to grow, because no one ever changed if they weren't challenged with something. When you overcome that challenge, you then build the confidence to say, I've got this. I'm not surviving. I can do anything because I'm in control. I have the power to do something.
Right. Love that. Love it. I want to thank you so much for coming on here. And I want to thank you for just being so willing to share your knowledge and bring people insight of what it's like to be in HR and the different areas of HR that they didn't even consider being a part, I'm sure. And just being able to help people in this journey. And I really hope that everyone goes out, connects to Power to Rise Collective, and help continue this conversation, because without having people contributing, it's not doing what you're hoping it to do. So hopefully everyone that's listening to this will go join this collective. And even if you're not looking for a job, that's not the point. The point is to create a community. So thank you so much for coming on. If you want to give any place where people can find you, where they can find the collective and all of those things so that they can reach out to you, I want to definitely give you the opportunity to tell them that.
Yeah, happy to. And just before I do that, I just want to say thank you, Bradley, for all the work that you're doing on the job seeker's journey. It's so needed. It's so needed now more than ever. Again, I've been in HR for 20 years. I've seen ebbs and flows. I've seen ups and downs in the market. I've seen ups and downs in volume of people being let go across industries. And this is a different world we're navigating. So I think your resources are so, so important. And I just look forward to continuing to share information, collaborate in any way that we can, because I think we're on parallel paths to help the broader community. And as you mentioned, even if someone isn't looking right now, they may be in a position later to do so. Or if you know someone in your network, because I'm sure that most of us know people in our network who could use this resource, also let them know. Again, it's a free resource. It really is just the power of collective good, which is why it's collective. And so you can connect with me on LinkedIn, Elissa Mahendra. You can please join the group Power to Rise Collective. We are just in the process now of kind of crowdsourcing for content, and we're going to bring regular content tools, resources, speakers to bear for the community. I'm a collective, and then over time we'll continue to add to it, and we want your voice to be part of it. So appreciate the time, appreciate the platform, and hope that I was able to share a few nuggets that help the career seeker's journey and those who are in this season of their life.
Well, that'll do it for this episode of the Job Seeker's Journey podcast. I want to thank Elissa for coming on. I want to thank her for her candor. I want to thank her for her thoughtful answers and for her heart for those of us that are going through the job search. As we mentioned in the last episode, and as she described in this one, she has put together a collective on LinkedIn called the Power to Rise Collective, where all of us going through this journey, people who have a heart for people that are going through this journey, are thinking about changing jobs, anybody who might be in this situation, it is a collective where we all can share ideas, can share things we've learned, and can learn together. And I highly encourage you to go on LinkedIn, find the Power to Rise Collective, and get involved in that move. As always, if this is your first time listening, thank you for hitting the play button. If you have listened to multiple episodes, I can't thank you enough for doing that. If you're listening to this on Spotify or any other place where you can get a podcast, please like and subscribe to this podcast so that you can get the latest episodes. Please rate and review so that it can get out in front of more people. If you're on LinkedIn or if you're on YouTube, please like, subscribe, make a comment, start a conversation. Let's start to get this in front of more people, because I know that the information that we are putting out in this podcast will help those going through this journey. But without further ado, we're going to go ahead and end this episode. We'll see you soon.